to the only time you will ever see me film in this location. But here we are, and I'm filming in this location, and I'm gonna do it as quickly as I possibly can because I am doing this with all natural light, and I'm hoping to make it through to the end before the sun goes any lower. It shouldn't set for several hours, but it is moving, and so I am losing it. So I'm going to try and do this super fast, and in the spirit of that, let's go ahead and just dive right in. This is my July wrap up, and I'm gonna start with 2-star reads. I have 3 of them this month, so there won't be any unhauling of any of them because they were all library books. So I've got Pride and Premeditation by Tisra Price. This was a 2-star read, mostly because it was very unbelievable. It was very teen angsty. I think that it should have been set not in the Regency period. It would have been more powerful to just take this story and put it, I imagine, in the 60s, the 1960s would have, or 50s even, late 50s, would have been a great place to put it. Yeah, I just didn't like it. The next one that I read that's a 2-star read was also for Jane Austen July, and it is Evelina, or Evelina, by Frances Burney. This was my first and only Frances Burney. I will not go back. I enjoy Jane Austen. I enjoy a lot of the really weird gothic novels from the Regency period, but every time I try to pick up another kind of novel of manners or another kind of everyday life kind of novel from the Regency period, I just hate it. I just hate it. So I'm not going back into Frances Burney, even though I know she was very influential on Jane Austen, and in fact I saw a lot of characters that I think Jane Austen kind of pilfered a little bit and put into Sense and Sensibility, and including Willoughby, like the name Willoughby even. So yeah, anyway, I just not gonna go back. And then also Jane Austen July, we have Where the Rhythm Takes You by Sarah Doss. I couldn't read my own handwriting. By Sarah Doss. And this one I finished today, actually. I started it right at the very beginning of Jane Austen July, right at the very beginning of the month. And I finished it today. And it was only on my normal 2x speed. It was only a 5-hour listen. So that should tell you everything you need to know about how I got on, or didn't, with that book. Next we have several audiobooks that were 3-star reads and 3 physical books. Very quickly, we have Anne of Manhattan by, I think that says Brenna Starler. I really should write more clearly. I had really high hopes for Anne of Manhattan. I was really looking forward to reading my very first retelling of an Anne of Green Gables book. It tries to retell several of the Anne of Green Gables books from the beginning, like Anne of Green Gables, Anne of Avonlea, and a little bit further. It just basically takes all the characters, puts them in the modern era, puts them in New York, and weirdly doesn't change much else, but everything changes. I did like the writing style though, and I would like to read something more original from that author in the future. Then we have, for Jane Austen July, we have Camp Austen by Ted Scheinman. This was just a conundrum to me. This was very strange. There was some information in there about Jane Austen and her family that I had never heard before, which is awesome, but also suspect to me. Never heard it before ever. But at the same time, it was like this personal memoir about how much he likes Jane Austen. It was very strange. It was a very strange thing, and I don't know what it is. I don't know how to categorize it. Yeah, no, not for me. And then we have The Cousins by Karen M. McManus. Did not really get on with this book either. I can imagine, I mean, it was entertaining. I listened to it all in one go when I was packing at the old apartment. I can imagine that many teenagers I know would really enjoy it. I had it figured out from a little bit before the halfway mark. It just, I mean, it was okay for what it was. I gave it 3 stars. It It was worth 3 stars. It was average. It was very average. Then I read This Is How You Lose the Time War. This was such a weird one to me. I mean, I've come to it a couple of times. It's very short. It's very simple. It's very poetic. You would think this would really be my thing, and it's just not. And this time it took, I think, 2.5 hours, and I finally got through it, but it did feel like getting through it. Yeah, I didn't like it. I read it for a Bookstagram book club, online book club, Zoom book club. How many times can I say the word book club? And then I ended up missing that book club. But I finally read the book. Then I have Wintering, which, you know what, I think I had returned to the library. I read a physical copy of it, but I had to give it back. I think I might have liked this one a lot more if I'd read it at a different time. I might actually try to pick it up again in the future in like a couple of years and see how that goes. Then we have Survive the Night by Riley Sager. I gave this 3 stars. I read it in one day. I enjoyed it quite a lot, but also really disliked certain aspects of the ending. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but there is one aspect of the end which I think you're supposed to consider, oh, what a happy ending, which really translates as a psychological power struggle issue. And so for that reason, I've given it 3 stars. But I know a lot of people hated this book, and I did not hate it. Not at all. I've hated other Sager books a whole lot more than I hated this one. But I did not enjoy it as much as I enjoyed Home Before Dark, which has been my favorite Sager so far. Oh, then we have the Anthony Trollope of the month. Framley Parsonage. If you want to know what I thought about Framley Parsonage, you can go ahead and go on my Goodreads or on Instagram, and you can find out there. I just feel the same way about Trollope that I always do. He's just dull. We don't connect. He can make me laugh out loud. Not so much in this book. This book is about gambling and all sorts of things. Somehow he makes everything feel muted. He's just a very muted individual, and I am curious what he was like as a human being. I mean, he's this man who is very cosmopolitan. He traveled all over the world. His mother was very forward thinking, like in her choices and her lifestyle, and she wrote books. She wrote a pretty interesting and kind of scathing like memoir, vignette, travel log sort of book about the States. And I just can't imagine he was this dull of a human being, but maybe he was. Maybe he was. I don't know. But I have 2 more of those books left to read. Not reading one this month in August, not reading one, but I'll pick up the 4th book in the series, 4th of 5 in the series in September, and then just have the very last one to read in October and November, and then I will never read another Trollope again, knock on wood. Then impulse pickup. It was a, can you see that? It was a peak pick, and that at my library is popular current titles that you can always get a copy of, but you can only keep them for a couple of weeks. So I just grabbed the Guncle, read it, and yeah, I mean, I've read this story before. I've seen this story before. The children of a best friend or a sister or a brother or a someone dies, and the cut off, kind of selfish, maybe money oriented, or maybe self-protective individual, usually single, or if they're not, they end up single fairly quickly, usually a workaholic of some sort, ends up taking them in and being changed by that in some foundational way. And that's basically the premise of this book. I mean, I've read it before, so, and I enjoy it, but I would have liked, you know, it's not enough, I don't think, to just make, like, the one change here is that the main character is a gay man. That's not that big of a change, especially in our day and age. That's not that big of a change. So I think there could have been more. Also, the children were not written in a realistic way at all. Now we're on to our 4-star reads. We have A Castle in the Air by Kirsten Gear. And this was 4 stars. It was enjoyable. I think now that maybe, I actually kind of forgot I read it until I went and made my list of books to use in this. Yeah, I kind of forgot I read it. So I think that maybe I need to lower the stars to 3. It was enjoyable. I will not lower it past 3, but it was very enjoyable. I listened to it all in one go as I was, again, packing. And maybe I might have enjoyed it more if I'd been able to listen to it slower, or if I'd chosen to listen to it slower and not while I was packing, but that's not what happened. So my experience with it was definitely pleasurable but forgettable. It's a fun mystery. It's not a very tricky mystery. It's a funny book. The character, the main character, the narrator, is very endearing. It's fun to spend time in her head. Then we have Gussie. Now Gussie does not come out for a few months. It could actually be October. It's not out yet. I got it from NetGalley. It is a middle grade fantasy, futuristic fantasy about a girl whose father's job is to kind of protect their village, but he leaves the village and she has to do the protecting of the village without, like, they didn't anticipate that that would be the case. And she thinks she has to do it kind of all on her own, but then she kind of realizes that community is an amazing thing. So this was a great book, really, really great. It is by Jimmy Quejoles. I'm not gonna try and not butcher that, but it's a great book, and when it does come out, I highly recommend you get your hands on it. I think you can still request it on NetGalley. It's well worth it. Then I have for Jane Austen July, Love and Friendship. That's a bit of her juvenilia. Maybe she was a young adult. I think she was a teenager when she wrote it. It is witty and biting and shocking, and it's just kind of funny to read it and throw all of your preconceived ideas about Jane Austen out the window. Super fun. And then I have Mansfield Park. Now I listened to this, but I'm showing you a hard copy because I have it. I listened to this and it's a 4-star read. That's the lowest any books from Jane Austen get from me is 4 stars. Mansfield Park remains my second to least favorite. Emma is my least favorite, although I did enjoy the most recent movie, Don't Throw Things at Me. I did enjoy the most recent movie, and I know that a lot of people really, really don't, but I thought it was great. I thought it was really great. It's another one of those, like, throw all your preconceived ideas about the stuffiness of the Regency. This Regency was not stuffy, as one of the books that I'm about to show you that was a 5-star read this month for me will attest. They were not stuffy. I think that a lot of people expect a quote-unquote clean movie when they go to see a Jane Austen retelling adaptation, especially if it's set in the Regency period, because they think that it's safe. The Regency was not safe. Those people were people just like us, and they did a lot of the same things we do, and more. So just don't put people in boxes, even if they're Regency people. So I really love that rendition, and I know it's silly with the nosebleed and all of that stuff, but it's passionate. Like, it's showing how passionate and emotional that book actually is. But why am I talking about Emma? I didn't read Emma. Emma is my least favorite book by Jane Austen. My second least favorite book is the one we're talking about right now, which is Mansfield Park. And that's just because I can never, ever feel like I connect with Fanny Price. I just have no connection to her whatsoever. I know a lot of people get really upset about her love life choices, her priorities, things that happen in that fashion, but that's not it for me. I don't care who she is in love with or who she fantasizes about. I just really feel like she is the flattest of all the characters that Jane Austen created. So I just don't like her. I don't like her. Then we have the Regency years. I got this when I was in Houston. I got this when I lived in Houston. It was the first book I bought in Houston, and I read the first bit of it and really enjoyed it, and then never finished reading it because I did a move, and then I did another move, and now I did another move, and in that last move mentioned, I finally read it. Thank you, Jane Austen, July. And it's got a lot of information. It's pretty dry. I mean, it reads like a traditional history book, but there's a lot of information. There's a lot of detail, and it's not a slog or anything. It's just like, it's a straight up history book. So yeah, it was good. It was fine. If you want to know a lot about it, about the Regency period, it's a great book to read. And then I picked up the Guncle on a whim when I went to pick this up from my holds. So can you see that? The sun is kind of hard. This is the Rose of Versailles, and do I have time for this? Yes, I do. I'll make time for it. The Rose of Versailles. When I was in college, my very first college roommate, who has become one of my very best friends of all time, she told me, she grew up in Italy, and she told me about watching this this anime cartoon on Italian television, dubbed in Italian, The Rose of Versailles, and she basically told me the whole premise of it. And she said she knew that it was from a comic book, a manga, but she said comic book. And so I used to keep an eye out for it for years. I mean, we're talking 30 years ago. I used to keep an eye out for it and never found it in the States. And then, you know, this was pre-Google, pre-YouTube and all of that. Then when I was in Paris a few years ago, I went to Versailles, and I had booked a special tour that would take you into Marie Antoinette's chambers, which were not open to the public. But they neglected to tell everybody who booked for that tour that Marie Antoinette's rooms were under construction, and we would be seeing Madame du Barry's rooms instead. I said that very strangely. Madame du Barry. Madame du Barry's rooms. And we were bummed about that, but then we saw the rooms, and it was actually super interesting and really atmospheric and a little bit creepy, and I loved it. I loved every second of it. And these are basically just storage rooms now, but they store a lot of the, I mean, they're not like set up for the public, but they store a lot of the original furnishings and wallpapers and paint and tile in the bathrooms. The woman had 3 tubs in her bathroom. She had a fully tiled bathroom with tubs and a running chamber, like water chamber pot. Just super interesting. Really, 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 really amazing insight, and I wish that we had seen Marie Antoinette's, which would have been much more finished, because they do these special tours, even though it's not open to the public. But we got to see some other things too, like Louis's study, which, because of, I'm going off on a total tangent here, but because of the Russian Revolution, no, because of the French Revolution, many of the pieces of furniture and all of the pillows and all of those things, carpets, were pillaged. They were all taken and distributed among the poor, or the average. And, you know, you can think what you want about that. But the one thing, there are a couple of things that they couldn't take because they were just too heavy, so they kind of just gave up and left them there, were Louis's desk and this really cool clock. Now, the Palace of Versailles, the people who, the trust that owns and runs it, just spend so much time and effort and money trying to bring back these pieces that belong in the palace from all over the world at auctions and things. So I just found all of that fascinating, and I would never have known that if I hadn't signed up for this tour, but I digress. On this tour, there was 2 other couples. One couple was a mother and daughter from Japan, and they spoke very little English, and the other couple was, I think they were Croatian or Estonian. They spoke English. They told me where they were from, but I don't remember, but they were on their honeymoon, and they were very much into like these huge open public displays of affection, and it was uncomfortable. They didn't want to be with other people, and they were rude also. They were pretty rude. And so the Japanese mother and daughter and I, even though we didn't speak the same language, ended up spending a lot of time together, especially lunch. And during lunch, they were saying how much they idolize, they didn't use that word, but they were saying how much they idolize Marie Antoinette. The whole reason they had come, they were staying in Versailles, not Paris. They were staying in Versailles, not the palace, but the town, for a week. And they'd come from Japan specifically to go to Versailles, the palace, every single day and do different events. So the night before, they had gone to like a candlelight dinner in the Hall of Mirrors, and like participated in some dance quadrille or something that was very specific to the court of Marie Antoinette. Just things like that. And so they had also signed up to go and see her rooms, and this was like the piece de resistance of their vacation. And then they were told, no, sorry, we're not going to take you to Marie Antoinette's rooms. So they were pretty bummed. But the daughter was telling me that she and her mother fell in love with Marie Antoinette when the daughter was a child, because she'd grown up watching reruns of this cartoon on Japanese television, and then she'd read the manga when she got a little bit older, and the mother had read it with her, and they'd fallen in love. Now, this is not it's not specifically about Marie Antoinette, but it does take place in her court. It is actually about a girl who dresses up as a boy for a lot of different reasons in Marie Antoinette's court. All of that to say, I was reminded of my roommate who had told me about this. So I did a fresh search for the first time since my college years, and there's so much more available to us now as far as information and finding information and seeking things out. He's leaving in a huff. And seeking things out, that I was able to track it down, and I got it from my library. And this is just the first of 5 volumes. So this is a little insight there. And I enjoyed it. I did. I don't know that I will continue reading all 5 volumes, especially since I actually know the entire story. But it was like a victory. I think this is the oldest book I've ever had on my TBR. Maybe the first book I had on a TBR that I didn't even know what a TBR was. And now 5-star reads, and I'm gonna do this really fast because we're losing the sunlight. So first I have Paperbacks from Hell by Grady Hendrix. This was a really fun read. I read it, I didn't half-heartedly read it. I half-heartedly participated in Summerween, and I read this with my whole heart. I listened to it. It was great. It's free on Audible if you want to listen to it too, and you have an Audible subscription, and it is about the history of the horror paperback and also kind of a social history. It was really entertaining, really funny, really sarcastic, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Then we have Breathe by Joyce Carol Oates. I kind of forgot that I read this. It was my very first Joyce Carol Oates, and it was it's a NetGalley arc that I was given, and I read it and I absolutely loved it, mostly I think because it was set in New Mexico, and that is a setting that is close to my heart, and I think that's what made me actually pick it up in the first place, and I did enjoy it. I don't generally read a lot of those kinds of books, and by those kinds of books I mean like drama-centered, kind of driven by sadness plots. I don't tend to choose those. If there's sadness in a book, that's great. But I would never pick something like A Little Life just because sadness is like a character in the book. If I'm going to read a book where an emotion is a character, I don't want it to be sadness or despair. That was kind of how this one was. I didn't know that going into it though, and yeah, I enjoyed it. I did. I can't lie. I did enjoy it. I gave it 5 stars. I think I said in my review that I would be reading more Joyce Carol Oates. I don't know that that's the case because, like I said, the book didn't stick with me really. Yeah, anyway. So then we have Call Me Athena, which is a novel in verse by, I don't know because I didn't write it down, but it's here on the picture that I've posted for you. This comes out in August, so you can buy it. I pre-ordered it after having read an arc from, again, NetGalley. It was so beautiful. It is so beautiful. I loved this book. I loved everything about this book. It reminded me of the first time that I read The Poet X. I mean, it's just There's something about a novel in verse when they get it right, when the author gets it right, when the poet gets it right. It's just so powerful, and that's what this was. Then I read, I think it's my last no, it's not, my second to last NetGalley, Yes You Can Wear That by Abby Hoy. And I became an Abby Hoy fan, and I now follow her on Instagram, and she is a plus-sized human being who wears what she wants, and I loved that. And I really liked her book because it was all about, it wasn't like trite, be who you want to be, wear what you want to wear, you're beautiful no matter what. It was like, love yourself. Forget everybody else. Like, that sounds terrible. Like, forget what everybody else is thinking, because nobody's really thinking about you. And if they are, that reflects on them, not you. And express yourself, because you are unique and awesome and fun and wonderful, and you have to live with you every day. I don't know if that made any sense, but that's what I took away from it. And yeah, there's a lot of fun pictures, colorful, flamboyant, out there, big personality, beautiful personality. So the book is very colorful and fun and full of great like fashion tips and things like that, but that's not what it's about. Then I have Yoga Pant Nation by Lori Gelman. This one comes out this month, or it might already be out. I think it's already out actually, but I got it on a NetGalley ARC, an audiobook, and I loved it. I'm trying to talk really fast because the sun is going down and my dog is whining, but I loved it. It's the third book in the Class Mom series that she's written. She is the wife of Gelman from, well, now I just call it Regis. I actually think of it as Regis and Kathy Lee, no matter what. But if you remember the Regis Philbin morning show, Gelman has been there from, I think, the very beginning, and he's the producer, and his wife now is writing these books, and she's written these 3 books now about the same mom who is awesome. And the first one is called Class Mom, and the second one is You've Been Volunteered, and this one is Yoga Pant Nation, and it just kind of follows this community through ups and downs that are really funny but also really real, and I enjoy them. Then I listened to Dear Mrs. Bird by A.J. Pierce and loved it so much I immediately pre-ordered the second one, which is arriving for me this month, and I'm super excited about it. I read that because I finally gave in to Emma from Reading by My Shelf and Book Break fame. I finally gave in to all of her gushing about this book. I really enjoy Emma's channels, but she tends to enjoy a lot more dark material than I do. I like dark, but we like different kinds of dark. Like, she loves a little life and I don't. So I don't generally take her reading suggestions, although I enjoy watching her read things and react to them. Anyway, I finally gave in. I was like, I prepared myself. I was thinking, this is gonna be dark. She says it's really lighthearted, but it's lighthearted for her is gonna be dark, and it wasn't. I mean, it is, but it's not. It's because it takes place during the Blitz, so of course it's heavy, but it was really great. The other reason why I had avoided it all these years is because I'm kind of oversaturated. So I'm oversaturated with World War II stories, and this takes place during World War II, but it doesn't feel like World War II. And then my last audiobook listen was this one, Home is the Sailor by Patrick Taylor. This is a novella in the Irish Country Doctor series, and I would have bought it, like I want the whole series, and I would have purchased it, but I just couldn't find it in print, but I could get it on Audible, so I did that. And I listened to it, and it was just like, I think it was like an hour and 5 minutes or something on double speed. I think it's a 70-page novella or short story that just gives more background information, more history. It was nice. It was fun. I enjoyed it. So I'll skip ahead to the actual Irish Country Doctor book I read for the month, which was Fingal O'Reilly, Irish Doctor. This is more backstory. I gave this 5 stars. These are all 5-star reads. I gave this 5 stars, which was nice because if you'll remember, I had given the previous one 3 stars. It was the first time I'd given one of these books a 3-star review. And this one is also backstory, but I don't know, it read differently, it read more quickly. The last one had, I felt, an overabundance of medical, like, absurdity talk, and this one had, of course, it's one of the striking features of these books, is the medical talk, because Patrick Taylor is a medical researcher, but it didn't feel like too much this time. He's literally going to try and lay on the pile of books. David Copperfield, which I finished this morning. Super big chunker. And I did enjoy this, but I think my expectations, I'd never read it, I'd watched the movie. I knew the movie, the very recent movie with Dev Patel, and I knew the movie was different from the book, but dare I say it, I loved the movie way more than I liked this book. And I know that this is Charles Dickens's baby. This is the one that he, David Copperfield is the creation that he feels most emulates himself. Semi-autobiographical. I say that with a, like, disbelieving spirit, because having read biographies of Charles Dickens, I think this is a fancy of his, like, it's fanciful to think that what he's created here is autobiographical. Semi would be the operative word there. But, I mean, it was fine. It was a Charles Dickens. I'm glad I'm taking a break this month in August. I think I had really high hopes for this because so many people say, like, this is the one, this is a great book. And I thought it was a good book. I thought it was one of the better ones that I've read thus far, but I didn't think it was great. Yeah, and I feel like I'm hesitant because this is Charles Dickens we're talking about here, and I'm like, it wasn't that great. But for me, that's how it felt. Persuasion, and I did read this in physical copy. For Jane Austen July, we have Persuasion, and this particular copy was given to me as a Galentine's gift several years ago. I have another copy of this somewhere, but I don't know where it is. And so I read this one, I hadn't read this one before, and I so love these editions. I don't think they make them anymore like this, the modern library classics. I really, really love these. I have Little Dorrit in this edition as well, and I love it. But anyway, again, I digress. For someone who wants to finish this quickly, I digress a lot. Persuasion was awesome. I love Persuasion. I really love Persuasion. It is one of my very favorite Jane Austen books, and I wish that, and I wonder what her next book would have been. You know, I know we have Sanditon and we have, like, fragments of the Watsons, but I really do wonder where she would have gone, like, just to read this one and think, like, where would she have gone in her writing. But we don't know, so I'll stop thinking about that. And then I will do this one too. I just finished this morning. Ooh, there's something very loud going on outside. That's exciting. I finished this one this morning, and this was super fun. I think this was my 31st time. I tried to count this morning how many times have I read it, and I think, as far as I can recall, this was my 31st read of Pride and Prejudice. And this time I was really looking at Wickham and Lydia, and kind of surprised, because I'd never read it this way before, but I was reading it this way now, at how generous, even though she's holding them accountable, even though she doesn't lessen the ridiculousness of either of, or the manipulation that Wickham does, she's very generous with them, and she's very kind and gentle and understanding of them at the same time that she is like, they screwed up. And these are the consequences. And I was really looking at them, and they were really standing out to me this read, and that's never happened before. So this was a fun read for me, interesting to read it without, like, of course Darcy and Elizabeth are there in the forefront, but yeah, it was interesting to read with an eye on something else for a change. And then I read the second book in the, I don't ever remember what the series is called, probably because they don't print it on here, the Fingal something or other, Fingal Straits? Here it is. The Finfarin Peninsula. Nothing at all what I was thinking. But this is the second book in the Finfarin Peninsula series. The first one was Librarian at the Edge of the World, or Library at the Edge of the World, and I read that last month and absolutely loved it. It's just such a feel-good, happy, plenty of conflict, but not like unrealistic conflict. People have conversations that I think people would really have. People make decisions that I think they'd really make. People make mistakes that I think they'd really make. And also, like, there's laugh out loud funny parts as well. Just, you know, small town stuff. I just love it. I love that kind of thing. And so this continued on with the stories of the people in this community, and the main character, who is, you know, still a little bit, even though she's gone back to where she grew up, she has some culture shock to deal with, you know, some culture shock. And yeah, it's just a fun, friendly, happy little world to be in. And I do have the rest of the books in the series, and I have the last one that hasn't come out yet in the States pre-ordered, and I will read them all, but I'm gonna take a break in August. And then the last book I have to tell you about is my favorite one from this month, and that is Mad and Bad: Real Heroines of the Regency by B. Koch. I bought this the same time that I bought this from Book Outlet, and this is really super interesting. It's great if you have a chance to get your hands on it, but it's not something that I read for Jane Austen July. But when I picked that up, I picked up this too, and this is great. It is kind of a pop culture who's who of the underrepresented women of the Regency, and in it you find women in light of themselves, men not the central figures in the history. And it's not necessarily, I mean, some of the names you will have heard of, like Carolyn Lamb. There's a quote from somebody from somewhere, probably Abraham Lincoln. No, definitely not Abraham Lincoln. But it's something like, something about how, you know, a woman's genius is often misconstrued as her insanity. So thinking about, someone likes their motorcycle. Anyway, thinking about Carolyn Lamb, you know, women who were very close to her, men who were very close to her, her husband, just really admired her and thought that she was incredibly intelligent, and she was. And then we go and we write about how insane she was, and how wild and crazy and on the seat of her pants she lived life, and she did all those things. But did she do it because she was impulsive and she chose to, or did she do it because she was chemically imbalanced? You know, who knows? We make the assumption that she must have been crazy, but she very well could have just been making those choices. You know, Lord Byron, we kind of still admire him for making the exact same kinds of choices. The book doesn't go into this, not really. The book just kind of tells you, like, the stories of these people. It's meant to champion the representation of women in Regency romance novels, contemporary Regency romance novels, because this author is the owner of Ripped Bodice. So she's the owner of Ripped Bodice, which is historically one of the first, or maybe the only, actually, bookstore devoted to romance literature. And so she has an agenda. She absolutely does. And her agenda is there, but it doesn't, like, detract from the history. The history is very well researched, but it's not a deep dive history. It's not like the Regency years that I showed you as a 4-star read. This is very gossipy, and it reads very, it's like a taste test. And then at the end of every chapter, she gives you a list of resources where you can find a lot more academic and detailed information about the women that she has written about in each chapter, and each chapter is broken down into topics like mistresses, or the ton. Is it ton or ton? T-O-N. I never know. The ton or the ton. Or the tone. I don't know. The people who ruled society at the time. So that's the first chapter, and then you've got the mistresses, and then you've got the scientists, and then you've got the artists, and, you know, so she breaks it down. So yeah, I mean, it was super interesting, and I learned an awful lot, even though a lot of these women I had already had some kind of run-in with, and some of them I had never even heard of, and I totally want to read more about them, but not in August. So my TBR for August has already gone up, and truth be told, even though it's not quite August yet, I've already started reading some of these books. I was especially excited and curious to start some of the books that were suggested to me by the librarians for Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day. So that's the one I'm most apprehensive about, but also the one that I'm most excited to get started with. So I went ahead and started reading 2 of those books. One I am absolutely loving every minute of, and I can't wait to tell you about it. And one I'm really hating, and I'm trying hard not to DNF it, and I just might DNF. So stay tuned for more information about that. If you want to know before I do my August wrap-up video, check me out on Goodreads, check me out on Instagram, posting reviews of books as I finish reading them, usually on the day I finish reading, but at least within 1 or 2 days of when I finish reading, I will post a review of every book so you can find out in real time what I'm reading, when I'm reading it, how I'm finishing it, and how I feel about it. Or you can wait a month if you can handle that kind of anticipation. That's what I'm looking for. If you can handle that kind of anticipation, then go ahead and wait until the end of August. I won't be able to though. As you can see, I've already started reading. So I'm gonna keep reading those. I don't know if I'm gonna DNF or not. I feel like I shouldn't, but I really want to. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Thank you. This has been a weirdly lit, increasingly darkening, oddly boring background video with a lot of tinkling of things and revving of motors and whining of dogs, and you stuck through it to the bitter end, so thank you so much. By the end of August, I should have bookshelves as my background, and reliable lighting. So every day brings normalcy after a move closer and closer to attainment. Yeah, anyway, bye.